looks at the Maqaasid of Sharia, the principles of Sharia, the general aims of Sharia, and ignore the individual adillah. And they don't mind to ignore those adillah completely, claiming that those adillah have no value when we look at the bigger picture, the bigger aims and objectives of a Sharia. Okay? And on the other hand, on the other side, we see the opposite extreme. The opposite extreme, they focus on certain adillah, the individual adillah, and they ignore the bigger picture of al-Islam. Both are wrongs. Okay? We will see that the best understanding is to understand, brothers, and this is the conclusion, okay, one of the main important conclusions, to understand that there should be no contradiction between the bigger picture and the small side, the small part of that picture, because actually the bigger picture is nothing but those individual adillah gathered together, okay, put together in order to form the bigger picture of al-Islam. Okay, there should be no contradiction whatsoever. And therefore, if we would like to consider the bigger picture or the big adillah, big principle, main principles and main aims of al-Islam, we should consider the individual adillah as well. Okay? And vice versa, once we look at the individual adillah of al-Islam, we should make sure that those individual adillah of al-Islam fit into the bigger picture of al-Islam, fit into what? The main aims and objectives of al-Sharia or of al-Islam. I hope that this conclusion is clear. Okay? This is the conclusion of the whole topic. Okay, examples of that. Let us take examples of that. The first misconception is what? What was the first, sorry, not the misconception. What was the first extreme here?
Those who look at the big picture and think the adillah is insignificant.
Yes, ignore. Not just only insignificant, but ignore, okay, the individual adillah. Example of that. Once we talk about al-hudud, once we talk, brothers, once we talk about Maqaasid as-Sharia, always the issue of al-hudud, that's why I will mention this again and again, because it is the main discussion now, al-hudud, okay, women rights, in al-hudud, sorry, in al-hudud specifically about the hadd al-ridda, okay, the punishment of apostasy, okay, and sometimes maybe the capital punishment. So al-hudud, the penal code of al-Islam. Women rights, okay, women rights, and they talk also about human rights. Normally they talk about these things. Sometimes also they mention issues like al-jihad. Is it offensive? Is it defensive? And the aims and objectives of a Sharia go against the so-called offensive jihad. طبعا offensive jihad is the wrong translation of jihad al-talab. Jihad al-talab is a proactive jihad. This is the best translation or a better translation. Proactive jihad is not offensive, because the word offensive, okay, it has a negative connotation. Anyway, so they talk about these things. Example, okay, example of those who are focusing on the bigger picture or the main principles or the spirit of al-Islam, the spirit of al-Sharia, the aims and objectives of al-Sharia, and ignore the individual adillah, is those, for example, who claim that some hudud, some of the hudud, go against the spirit of al-Islam. Because the spirit of al-Islam, the aims and objectives of al-Islam is what? To preserve people's life. Okay? To preserve people's life. Okay? Or lives. And therefore, some of the hudud, such as Hadd al-Ridda, goes against this preservation of people, okay, people's lives. And therefore, if you go with the spirit of Islam, okay, you will find that Hadd al-Ridda is against that, and therefore we have to look at Hadd al-Ridda from another angle. And we find, this is their justification, this is their argument, they said that we find that Hadd al-Ridda is not mentioned explicitly in Al-Quran. This gives us more courage to abolish Hadd al-Ridda and to remove it completely from our Islamic jurisprudence. What do we do about Hadd al-Ridda? We have to interpret it, reinterpret it. And we don't call it Hadd al-Ridda, yani a punishment for the crime of apostasy, but we should call it a crime for treason. Okay? A crime for treason. And those who used to apostate at the previous time, okay, those actually used to apostate and used to commit an act of treason. And therefore, they had this kind of punishment to them, and that can be understood. Okay? They completely ignored the specific adillah that talk about Hadd al-Ridda as Hadd for those who apostate just for apostasy, just for changing their religion from al-Islam to kufr. Okay? To other religion other than al-Islam. Just because of that. Actually, I found a statement, amazing statement from Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, where he said that during that time, those who used to apostate, they were not committing an act of treason. They just apostate because the Islamic State at that time was so strong, they cannot commit anything against the Islamic State. So they were killed just because they apostated. Okay? So those people who are holding this extreme view, they are saying, look, where is the aims and objectives of Sharia? The aims and objectives of Sharia to maintain justice between people, to preserve the life of people, etc., etc. And therefore, we should look at Hadd al-Ridda from another angle. Brothers, don't be surprised. I was sitting with some Tullab al-Ilm from America one time, okay? And they were discussing the Hadd of al-Rajm, okay? Stoning. See, how, the level of inferiority complex that we have reached to Muslims in the West. They have reached to a great level of this inferiority complex. If they said that we can accept the capital punishment, but we have to question stoning the adulterous. Why? People in the West here, they don't accept the capital punishment. They don't accept it. They think that it is against the human rights. Okay? But in America, they accept it. Why? What is the difference? Because in America, the capital punishment is practiced. So therefore, the yardstick is what? The yardstick to accept whether this is acceptable from an Islamic point of view or it is not acceptable is what? Not only culture, the Western value. Okay? If it is accepted by the West, then we can understand and it does make sense. If it is not accepted by the West, then it doesn't make sense. So therefore, they said capital punishment, I was sitting with them. They said capital punishment, it does make sense. But stoning, we have to look at it. Okay? We have to consider what is the aim of Sharia behind stoning. Okay? And this is an example of people misusing this issue of aim and objective of al-Sharia. Inshallah, we will continue after a very short break, or we will continue inshallah in the next episode. Jazakumullahu khairan.
هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله ورسول الله معلمنا هذا القرآن يوحدنا لطريق الخير يوجهنا الله تعالى أنزله ورسول الله معلمنا